Welcome to the Conservative Continuum. I am your host, Mick Meow. So, let's do some chitter-chattering about what's coming up. April 3rd, the OK GOP Action Team will be hosting an Oklahoma State Republican Party Chairman Forum. The venue is going to be Higher Plain Baptist Church in Oklahoma City. That's going to be at 6 p.m. Both AJ Ferrati and Sean Roberts have agreed to attend. Then on April 17th, the OK GOP Action Team will be hosting an Oklahoma State Republican Party Vice Chairman Forum. That venue is going to be at the Sheridan Church in Tulsa. Again, it's going to be at 6 p.m. All the candidates have agreed to come. That would be myself, Wayne Hill, Dr. Paula Price, and Michael Stopp. So make sure you put that on your calendar and come out if you can. Don't forget that April 4th is Election Day. That's going to be school boards, that's going to be mayors, and that's also going to be the county clerk race. Now, I personally am endorsing Brian Shellum and for Edmond mayor candidate, and I'm also supporting Marissa Treat for the Oklahoma County Clerk. It is an important race, and we really do need to win it. Please subscribe to me on patreon.com/MickMeow. You can also find the Conservative Continuum on Rumble and Facebook. So today we have a Red Cat show with Alex Gray. Mr. Gray most recently served as Deputy Assistant to President Trump, and he was the Chief of Staff of the White House National Security Council. He will be discussing the national security threat that China poses, and that's here in Oklahoma too. So grab your kitty treats and your milk, and let's get ready to engage. Well, it's time for the cattle wall, so let's get to it. Today I have a little food for thought and some things to ponder. I was reading through, doing some research for today, and I came across an excerpt from the Christian Post. And this was done in January 15th of 2018, and I'd like to read it for you. Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that the way of the kings from the east might be prepared. That's Revelation 16:12 of the Bible. Revelation 9:13 through 19 tells us that a massive 200 million man army will arise from the region east of the Euphrates River. Right now, China is the major power east of Jerusalem, and an army of 200 million, that's Revelation 9:16, fits with China's capability of equipping such an enormous army. In addition, the description and the huge numbers of death mentioned, which is in verse 19, may indicate the use of modern weapons of mass destruction. Now, China spends a large percentage of its annual GDP on the military and possesses nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction. So remember, this is speculative, and this verse may not be referring to China, but there are many other characteristics of China that have not been listed, such as their aggressive demand for Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the Soprasteres Islands, which proves that they have a strategy to control all of Asia. Their aggressive rhetoric on the world stage and the persecution of Chinese Christians. All of these characteristics of China make it easy to imagine that the kings from the East, who one day will march into Israel, will include China. However, the term kings of the East does mean kings of the rising sun, which would include, Japan and possibly other Asian countries. So it is impossible to know for sure if the Eastern Confederacy of the end times will include China, though it seems very likely that China will be involved for those above reasons. After the break, please welcome with me Alex Gray. He was the deputy to the president and the chief of staff of the White House National Security Council in the Trump administration. He is also extremely knowledgeable and was very intricate in the involvement of the China initiatives that were initiated by the Trump administration. Thank you, and stay with me after the break. Welcome to the Conservative Continuum. I am your host, Mick Meow. I am so grateful that you all are with us today. I want to have a shout out to our sponsors who support us and continually give to patreon.com/Mick Meow. Please go and be a sponsor today. Y'all, we have Alex Gray back with us today, and it is going to be a phenomenal interview. It's something that we really need to talk about because we hear it every day in the news. China. We hear that word every day. So, Alex, it is an honor to have you on. I am so glad that you are with us remote. Thank you for coming back. Yes.
Thank you so much.
You bet. So it is a necessary topic. Once again, we're going to have to talk about China and what's going on. It's really becoming detrimental to our nation as a whole. That's my fear, and that's what I see. But before we delve off into that, you have an extensive background dealing with national security as the deputy to the president and chief of staff of the White House for the National Security Council. That was in the Trump administration. And then also, I just want to say we are so fortunate to have someone like you here in Oklahoma, even though you're talking to us remote. I don't know where you are, but someone who has that knowledge, who can bring us that insight. So if you wouldn't mind, just briefly kind of tell our audience about your background, your service in the White House, and if you could include some of those roles that you had with the China initiatives during your time in the Trump administration. We'd love it.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. I love being on the show, Mick. So I was, I grew up in Oklahoma City and was very lucky to get a couple opportunities to serve my country in Washington under President Trump. I was at the White House from his very first day in office to his very last day in office, and was the second to last person to walk out of the West Wing after the president had left on January 20th, 2021. At that time, I was the chief of staff of the National Security Council, which is the body within the White House that coordinates all of the intelligence, foreign policy, defense, national security issues that go in front of the president. And as you can imagine, China was foremost on my mind and on our team's mind every day. Before I had that role, I was responsible for at the National Security Council a big chunk of East Asia and the Western Pacific, encountering China's malign activity in a huge swath of Asia. Spent a lot of time in the region, worked with the military, with the intelligence community to do what we could to stop China's bad behavior. And then finally, before that, I was the special assistant to President Trump for what's called the Defense Industrial Base. This is the idea that, in the event of a horrible conflict, we have to be able to manufacture our own military equipment, our own supplies. China's taken our manufacturing. Wall Street and the global establishment have offshored so much of our ability to manufacture the things we need for our own protection. You saw it with COVID. We couldn't even make respirators and surgical gloves. So I was, long before COVID, I was working to try and bring manufacturing and bring those capabilities back to the United States so we could defend ourselves.
Wow, that is amazing. I can't even fathom how much you had to have in your brain all day long, coordinating all of that. And truly, thank you for your service. I mean, it is so appreciative, and thank you for sharing that information with us. I know right now you are a managing partner at American Global Strategies. That company provides advice and assessment of global geopolitical environments. Tell me if I'm wrong here. You all devise strategies that help to navigate those government policies and processes, and then you assist on things like international business transactions or managing crisis situations domestically. Um, tell
Right.
us tell us a little bit about that, because I know you've done writings for The Hill and the Wall Street Journal on China and national security. I know you were writing a book about the U.S. strategies in the Pacific Islands. So kind of catch us up to speed, what you've been up to and what you guys are kind of doing out there since you've been since you've left the Trump administration, or since you've left the White House.
Yeah, so when I left, I started a business called American Global Strategies. We basically help U.S. companies and now a lot of Oklahoma companies navigate global challenges. So if you're a Oklahoma City or Tulsa business and you're trying to do business in the Middle East or East Asia or South America, you're going to run into a lot of problems. It's hard to do business overseas. Obviously, the cultures are very different. The economic models are very different. So we help use our expertise to help navigate that to the benefit of American and Oklahoma workers and companies. So that's what I spend most of my time on. But I remain incredibly focused, just as a private citizen, on what I think is the main issue facing our country for the next century, which is how to compete with China, with the Chinese Communist Party. How do we win? What does victory look like? And so you mentioned the writing that I've been doing. That's because I really think all the other things really, it's important to debate lots of different political issues. We all have strong opinions on different domestic issues. If we lose to the Chinese Communist Party, nothing else matters. This is an evil, authoritarian, totalitarian dictatorship that is seeking to change the order in the entire world and to put most of the world under their control to some extent. And we have to be aware of the challenge. And because of the experiences I had in government and the things I'm aware of and got to be a participant in, I feel like I have an obligation to share my perspective on the challenge and to offer some ideas about how this country can win, how we can push back against the Chinese communists.
Oh, I love it. That's what we want to focus on too. We would love to hear the strategies, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. We also would like to get that insight, which I think we all need. So I want you all to kind of bear with us here because I can feel that kitty. He's looking at me. See, here he is, needing his treats already. So, bear with me. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to delve into talking about this issue and really the existential threat of China with Alex Gray. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Conservative Continuum. I am with you with Alex Gray. So, we were talking about China. That is what we're focusing on today. That threat. Several months ago, you were with us, Alex, and we talked about the existential threat of China. Today, I really want to look at the national security aspect of it because every day I turn on the news, whether it's local or whether it's national, I hear one word: China. Everything I hear has a tag back to China. Fentanyl, tens of thousands of deaths in America. And there is this deadly path connection between China to Mexico, pouring into an unsecured open border in America. We have a Chinese spy craft that was allowed to transverse across our countryside, transmitting information. Who knows? Who knows what was being transmitted without being intersected or impeded or taken out until it went all the way across. We've got the app TikTok that is connected to the Chinese government. And I know that today, while we're recording a little early, there is a House committee that is talking to the people of TikTok and the data that they're gathering. We still have unanswered questions about COVID, the origins of it, and the hundreds of millions of dollars that went to do gain of function funding at the Wuhan lab. Now, we also know that China has come out and has admitted they are an aggressive regime, and they're saying that their goal is to have world dominance as a leader in every corner by the year 2049. So, if you would please, with your extensive knowledge, would you please explain to us a little bit what that means in terms for our national security here in the United States?
Well, let's start with what does this goal of global dominance by 2049, what does that mean? That's the
Yes.
100-year anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Their goal is slowly and steadily, it has matured and evolved from regaining their territories that they've lost. So this means Hong Kong, this means Taiwan, this means Tibet, which they're in the process of doing across the board. It means extending their control across their neighbors. This means seeking to dominate South Korea, Japan, Australia, India. And it means, for the longest time, the Washington elite dismissed this idea. That there was, the Chinese would never do this. The Chinese simply want to be good global citizens. Well, the reality is, global dominance means global dominance. It means displacing the United States as the global superpower. It means building bases in Africa, military bases. It means building military bases across the Pacific. It means building military bases in our own hemisphere. Their goal is to be the arbiter, the controller of global power, economically, militarily, diplomatically. They want to decide what sort of order all the countries of the world live in. Since World War II, we've lived in a world that's defined by American values, by our values of free enterprise and freedom and liberty. Their goal is to change that order. And so that that order becomes a mirror of the Chinese Communist Party's agenda and ideology. That's an agenda and an ideology that's based simply on fear and atheism and a desire to control and to dominate and to perpetuate the rule and the authority of the Chinese Communist Party at home and globally. It's a rule that is based on the interests of China first and foremost, and that means the interests of the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party. So we have to be very clear-eyed about what are they trying to do, what's the end goal, and what are the stakes. And I would argue the stakes could not be any higher. This is as serious of a threat as the Soviet Union or as Nazi Germany. This is an absolutely unparalleled, in many ways, challenge, because what we're dealing with is not just a country that has these expansive goals. It's a country that has the economic wherewithal and the military capability to project and to actually execute many of these very ambitious goals. So we have to understand the magnitude of the threat and the ambition that we're dealing with. I would just say, Mick, the additional important point here, unlike other threats that we faced, you just mentioned a handful of specific actions the Chinese Communist Party is taking. These are actions that are directed at the American homeland. These are not just actions that are going to occur in the Western Pacific, in Asia, in parts of the world that most Americans are not following. We're talking about TikTok targeting American children in their homes, taking their data, taking the data of their parents, suctioning it into China for the purpose of Beijing's social control agenda. That's a direct attack on the American homeland. We're talking about fentanyl, which is killing millions of people. We're talking about a epidemic that is killing more Americans than died in most of our wars. We are talking about, that is a direct attack on the American homeland. We're talking about the balloon that crossed the United States. Something like that hasn't happened since the Japanese sent balloons over the West Coast right after Pearl Harbor. We're talking about direct threats to the continental United States in a way we have not seen since World War II, if not before. So we have to be very cognizant of just the magnitude of the threat and the fact that this isn't something we can just pretend is happening elsewhere. This is directly aimed at where we live.
Yes, I am so glad you put it in those terms. And you use that word, that social control. That's what they're about, that control, that data, that information. Once they have it, then my goodness, what won't they do with it,
Right.
So I have a question for you, and I know the answer, but I really want to make the point about it. What do you think we could or should expect if we don't get a handle on it? And I've heard General Michael Flynn has indicated that we've got about 18 months before we lose our republic. I don't know. I mean, that is just what was, mentioned in a speech that I heard. I believe that, but I want you to kind of see if you can give us some insight on that.
Look, I think that American institutions are stronger than people give it credit for. I have a lot of respect for General Flynn, but I do think that our institutions are resilient. Our institutions are, they were conceived by some of the smartest people to ever walk the face of the earth, the American founding fathers. And there's a reason that we've survived world wars and civil wars. These institutions are really resilient. That being said, we are facing a combination of foreign threats and domestic challenges that we haven't seen in a very long time, if ever. So I do have a lot of concern that if we aren't vigilant, we're going to test the resilience of our Constitution and our institutions to a point that they don't need to be tested, right? We know we have the best system of government in the history of man. We know that. We don't need to test the resilience of those institutions. I am hopeful that we're going to get a president in the next couple of years who is going to be a good steward of our Constitution, right? I am hopeful that we're going to have a president who understands the constitutional nature of our republic and not only understands what it means to govern in a constitutional republic, knows that we have to have strength abroad to protect our national heritage and to protect our constitutional values. And as we talked about, Mick, the Chinese Communist Party is right now the greatest threat, in my estimation, to the long-term protection of our constitutional values and institutions. So if we don't have a president who can stand up to the Chinese Communist Party, over time we will lose our constitutional system of government over time if we don't have leadership that knows how to stand up to the CCP.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. The Republicans, Kevin McCarthy as the speaker, has created this bipartisan committee to China or on China. And he's addressing that, or that committee, excuse me, is supposed to address multifaceted threats. However, I believe that there is a subcommittee, and it is the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. So they're looking into the origins of COVID, and I know there's a couple other things, but specifically, this committee was able to obtain a unanimous vote to declassify information that would be given to the American people on the topic of the origins of COVID. However, the Biden administration is making a determination on how much and what information can be given based on national security. So I just want to get your insight based on your experience working as Chief of Staff of the White House for National Security Council in the Trump administration. But I think I just heard the cat, so it's a cliffhanger. When we come back, we're going to get Alex's insight into that. Don't go away.
I have been serving as a president of a women's club, which is really just a men and women's group, right, that where we come together, just common sense organization to get educated and equip one another. And so I really feel like this grassroots from the ground up is so important. However, what can you do to make it cool to be a Republican again? Like, how can you come across and share that with the nation so that it is cool? Because honestly, when my husband was running, family sells, children, kids, education, prosperity, right, rising up, hardworking parents, teaching their kids to work hard. Those things sell. And I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, most people want those things. Health, we want good health care, all those things. So how can you inspire from the top down and lead? Because we live in whether we like it or not, we live in an influencing world. Mm-hmm. Social media is everything. And so I want to know what you're going to do to make it cool, not necessarily to be a Republican, but to talk about these things, because we probably all agree about several of these things. Only because we put an R by our name and we say we're a Republican then we're kind of cast to the side. But these are values that most people actually care about.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I have one simple solution to this. Democrats have invested a lot of money in social media influencers, believe it or not. I didn't even know this was a thing, but there are these companies out there and they hire these young people and they can promote just about anything. I mean, I actually have a lawsuit going about YouTube influencers right now. I was shocked to learn that all these 20 something and even teenage kids are making millions of dollars promoting products. Well, guess what? They can promote ideas as well. And there's a couple of conservative companies that actually have a stable of conservative influencers. I'm 54 years old. I'm not going to claim that I'm like the hippest person in the world here, but you have to know what you don't know, right? And so you can hire very cheaply compared to the amount of money we blow. I think we had a consulting contract at the RNC in 2022 where we paid a famous person who is you see on television on Fox News, $800,000 for consulting services, communications consulting services. What do you guys think of the RNC's communications? I don't think we got our $800,000 worth. Let's put it that way. Now, let's say if we took that, they got ripped off, and that's a whole other story. But anyway, let's say you took that $800,000 and you spent it on 100 influencers and said, "Hey, kids, you know, go out to these communities where you live and make videos. Make videos about what you're doing. Make videos. We're trying to promote early voting in your state. Make a video of you sitting around the table in your sweats or whatever with your friends and filling out your ballots and then turning them in, taking them to the city hall or wherever the voting place is." That would move so many more people than some boring lecture by somebody like me. You know, so I think that that's something that we should do. That's smart. It's also cheap. I'm not saying get into TikTok, although some people would suggest doing that as well. I mean, young people do watch that stuff. But if you even just did Instagram or Facebook Live like this, if we use modern technology, imagine as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, when was the last time in my state party the state party chair actually sat and answered questions from members of the state party? That would be never. But it's actually free to do that. You could do it from your living room. You could do it once a month. You could take it 15 questions. You could have pre-screened questions, answer a couple of tough questions, answer 13 softball questions, whatever it is. It's so much more accessible today to meet and do things this way than it was 5 or 10 years ago. I don't think we're making best use of that modern technology, and we should be doing more of that. And so I'd love to see us doing that.
Welcome back to the Conservative Continuum. I want to say thank you again to our sponsors. Without you all, we couldn't be able to provide this kind of incredible, necessary information. Go to patreon.com/McMeow. Become a sponsor today. Alex, we were on a cliffhanger. So we want to just kind of get your insight into all of this that's going on with the origins of COVID and what's being given to us and what's not being given to us. So what thoughts do you have regarding the direction and the action that these committees should take?
Yeah, well, I was one of the handful of people at the White House who had the same access to classified information that President Trump had. There was very little that he saw that I didn't see, if really anything. I can tell you the deep state bureaucracy use classified information to hide what they're doing from the country and from our elected leaders. They use top secret SCI, the various different markings of classified documents as a way to hide their behavior. So, it's one of the easiest tricks in the deep state swamp playbook is to do what you're going to do, oftentimes at, adverse to the interests of the American people, stamp classified on it, and then not have to tell anybody what you're doing. And when you get questioned about why you're behaving a certain way, you say, "I can't tell you, that's classified." That's one of the oldest tricks in their playbook. So I'll tell you, I am skeptical that there is a much legitimate reason for hiding behind a banner of classification to talk about something as critically important to our country. I mean, let's think about this, Mick. Dr. Fauci and his henchmen destroyed the American economy, undermined our civil liberties. They spent years trying to force our children to take vaccines, to force Americans to wear masks. You go down the list of the things that they forced on us that later it turned out were medically unnecessary in many cases. And now the origin of the virus that led to all of these horrendous things, they're going to hide behind classification to avoid telling us and explaining why their behavior had to happen in the first place. I think that strikes most Americans, even those who aren't familiar with how classification works, as self-serving and self-dealing.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And at this point in time, there's such a lack of trust when you hear somebody saying, "Well, maybe I'll tell you, but I gotta, be very careful about what I'm going to tell you." Really? When did COVID start? 2019? I mean, come on,
And the reality is the intelligence community has ways of declassifying material that doesn't compromise our sources, doesn't put anyone's life in danger. There are ways to impart sensitive information to the public without giving away things that would harm our national security. And I've seen it done many times. And President Trump was adamant that we overclassified material, and he wanted to always make sure that we were being straight with the American people. And he forced us to go back and ask the tough questions of, why is this classified? Why would we call this top secret? And most of the time, in my experience, the deep state didn't have really good answers for why things were classified. So, I think if they wanted to get this information to the American people, they could certainly do that.
Yes, absolutely. I thank you for saying that, because that confirms my thoughts as well. I do want to get your insight with regards to the information that Americans should be able to obtain. I think we know that we're going to have stonewalling, or at least it seems like we're going to have stonewalling. But how do we get around that nationally, but locally as well? I'm thinking, thinking about the state of Oklahoma, but I know that impacts us nationally.
Well, the simple answer is politicians are elected to serve us, right? They're elected not to serve their own interests, not to cover their mistakes. They're elected because they're representing us. They're upholding an oath to our Constitution, both at the state level and nationally. And if they don't follow their oath, they have to go. And it's as simple as Americans showing up at the voting booth and holding politicians accountable who refuse. And I would say this: it's not just if the politicians refuse to be accountable, it's if they refuse to hold accountable the bureaucrats, the unelected deep state bureaucrats, whether it's at the state level, the local level, or the national level. If you can't control your bureaucrats, you have to be held accountable. It's very hard for Americans to hold some unelected bureaucrat accountable, but the politicians are supposed to do that. And if they're unwilling to do it, we have to hold them accountable.
Ooh, there you go. I heard a little boom go off in the background for that one, because that is absolutely true. So let's bring this back to Oklahoma. You had some discussions, or you were in the process of talking to Governor Stitt about a Oklahoma China Commission. And if I'm not mistaken, this included a ban on selling American farmland to any adversary of the United States, and vigorous, comprehensive review of our vulnerabilities here in our state to China at every level of government. So if you could just kind of give us a little bit of update or some insight into that.
Well, in my conversations with the governor, he's been very supportive. I think that this is likely going to be a state legislature, something they're going to have to deal with. I'm very excited that Senator Shane Jett has sponsored legislation, introduced legislation to create the commission. I'm hopeful that we will find companion legislation in the House, and I know Senator Jett is working on finding a sponsor in the House as well. This is something when I've spoken to the business community, the agriculture community, folks at our great universities, there's been widespread support for something like this. This is not a partisan issue. This is not a rural versus urban issue. This is something that all Oklahomans can rally behind. And I'm hopeful that Senator Jett's going to be able to make some real progress this session on getting this legislation to the governor's desk. And hopefully we can build a commission that basically, I don't want a commission that just produces a report for the sake of producing a report. I want a commission that has actionable recommendations that the governor and his cabinet members and policymakers can use to harden this state so we are not the same kind of target to Chinese influence that other states are. Oklahoma has a reputation for doing things our way, doing things the right conservative way. We should be a national leader on protecting our citizens from Chinese influence. And that's the opportunity we have here with Senator Jett's bill.
That I love that term, actionable recommendations. Just real quickly, do you know if that bill, if there is a bill already? Do you know what that number is by any chance?
I don't know the number off the top of my head. I know Senator Jett has introduced it in the Senate, and I am hopeful we're going to get some traction for it.
Okay, great. I will be talking to Senator Jett soon. So when I do, I will ask him. And we want to say thank you to Senator Jett. We think that you are doing an incredible job up there at the state capitol. I just want to give you a little shout out, sir. We appreciate you so much. Okay, real quickly, we're going to let that cat out because he's crying already again. He's so needy. I wonder if he's a Democrat. Wrong. Okay, we're going to take care of him and then we'll be back. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Conservative Continuum. We are here with Alex Gray. We are talking about China. Very, very important. So make sure you've got your ears on. Get that snack later. Come back to us. So, Alex, I want to talk and switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit in terms of foreign policy in the United States. We have a very weak leadership right now. China. They are stepping up in their influence as a world superpower. We've kind of touched on that, but we just saw that they brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and now they're trying to broker a deal to end the war in Ukraine. China and Russia have teamed up. It appears that China is giving Russia weapons, and yesterday, China and Russia signed economic agreements between the two of them. Let's not forget that China has promised that they were going to invade Taiwan and take Taiwan back by 2027, and I've heard that it could be as early as 2025. There have been some reports, some reporters have said that. And it just seems like this administration is not interested in being a world leader anymore. Maybe they feel like it's better to leave those kind of things to Xi Jinping to take care of. I don't know. But as far as you have been a term member of the Council on the Foreign Relations and a senior fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council, what do you think is going on?
Well, I think that, weakness gives you more weakness, right? And, this administration has cut our defense budget. They released a defense budget a couple of days ago that, with the inflation that they've caused, is actually, they claim it's an increase, but inflation is so high, it's actually a decrease. So we're in this incredibly dangerous foreign policy environment with a intentionally shrunken military. It's reckless. It's dangerous. It's a recipe for more instability, more war, more conflict. We look at what's going on in Ukraine. Well, what's going on in Ukraine is Joe Biden failed to deter Vladimir Putin from invading Ukraine. It didn't happen under Donald Trump's watch. Donald Trump, for 4 years, and I was involved in a lot of these discussions and negotiations, Donald Trump kept Vladimir Putin in his box. He was terrified of doing anything that would upset the American order. Donald Trump made it clear, just as he did to the North Koreans, as he did to the Chinese, as he did to the Iranians, that he was going to push American interests no matter what. And that's how we kept the peace in Europe for 4 years. It's no coincidence that Joe Biden comes in. He immediately caves to the Russians on an arms control treaty. He caves to the Russians on the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. He caves to the Russians. He says, well, if the Russians invade Ukraine and it's a minor incursion, I might not do anything. Well, a week later, they invade Ukraine. So let's not lose sight of the American weakness and bad policy decisions that have led to the position we're in. You look at Iran. President Biden decided that he was going to restart nuclear negotiations with the Iranians while they're in the process of violating international sanctions and reconstituting their nuclear program. He tried to revive Barack Obama's horrendous nuclear deal. And what did he get? Iran continuing to fund terrorism, continuing to oppress its own people. Weakness produces more, emboldens your adversaries. We do it time and time again under this administration. The horrible, chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan just reconfirmed to our adversaries that America's in decline and America's weak and vulnerable. You could just go down the list of foreign policy failures under this administration. I would point out with Saudi Arabia. Look, there's a lot about Saudi internal politics that Americans are not going to support and not agree with. But Saudi Arabia is a critical American partner in a very dangerous part of the world. And Joe Biden came into office attacking the leader of Saudi Arabia, calling him names, behaving in a really unprofessional, childlike way towards another world leader. And then taking a terrorist group that has been lobbing missiles at Saudi Arabia, including harming Americans, taking them off the terrorist list. And he's surprised that Saudi Arabia has decided to cozy up to China. No, none of this is surprising. Again, this is a weak American foreign policy, emboldening our adversaries, causing our allies to look for alternatives, and weakening America on the global stage.
Mm. And it seems it seems intentional. I'm so appalled by that, but it's egregious. I can't even formulate words because it gets me so to the point where I'm just like, what? My husband was in the military. You yourself, it. What are we serving for? I digress. I'll pull myself back. I'll pull it back together. But it's a very egregious situation to be in.
Yeah.
So In January, we're going to shift gears because I can feel my face getting red. My face is getting flushed. So in January of this year, the Oklahoma City Council, we're going to bring it back to Oklahoma, they voted and passed a professional service agreement for licensure to use a controversial software called Fusus, Fusus. And this is going to survey everyday citizens, which will be implemented by the Oklahoma City Police Department, and it's going to be accessed by city and state governments and different organizations. So this sounds like what China is doing in their surveillance country, where they are overwhelming their population, creating this techno-authoritarianism. In reality, this is the reddest state in the nation, and that's beyond scary. So just to even think that we're going to have all this surveillance camera going on, anybody who hears this should be like screaming at the top of their lungs at their city council members and at their state legislators. But what say you?
Well, look, I'm all for making sure that our law enforcement professionals have the tools they need to stop crime, and I'm all for in making sure that law enforcement is resourced and funded, and we're stopping the defund the police craziness, and we're preventing that type of radical left wing activism from getting to Oklahoma. I'm all for that. Where I have concerns is where we have what appears to be a effort to bring surveillance technology into Oklahoma that, from what I've heard about it, doesn't seem to have safeguards and doesn't seem to have the type of civil liberty protections that I think Oklahomans expect. So, we have this at the federal level where there's, we do surveillance for counterterrorism purposes. We do surveillance for counter-espionage purposes to stop spying. But we have a very robust system of oversight that by the judiciary to make sure that innocent citizens are not having their data or their civil rights or constitutional rights violated in the process of law enforcement trying to keep us safe. So, I'll take this as one example. The Oklahoma City Council created a Human Rights Commission, a totally, in my view, needless body that is actually has the opposite effect of what was intended. In my view, it actually is going to create a climate of fear and stifle civil liberties and free speech in the name of being inclusive. Well, rather than creating a body like the Human Rights Commission that I think is going to have a really dangerous impact on Oklahomans' ability to trust each other and to be honest and open with each other, why don't we, if we're going to go down the road of this sort of surveillance, we need to have a oversight board, a independent, trusted oversight board that is empowered by the mayor and the city council to make sure that this surveillance is only being used to actually protect citizens, not to enforce some sort of political speech, not to protect against political speech that the mayor and the city council don't like. We've got to have protections for innocent Oklahomans so that they can be confident that this is a real legitimate law enforcement function, not a way to censor unpopular opinions.
Ooh, I like that. And I'm glad that you brought up about the oversight board. We may have to talk more offline about this because that is a concern. It should be a concern to all citizens, but we should have like maybe a little bullet point plan of what needs to be put in place. Because I agree with you, the Human Rights Commission, what was that for? And who is going to be the arbitrator of the disciplinary action if a complaint comes? And what kind of complaints are you looking at? I mean, there's so many questions they're not answering. They're just throwing it out there.
Look, I have one of the things that I think makes Oklahoma so special is you look at the way we've welcomed refugees from all over the world. You look at the way this city and the state have been welcoming to people from across the world, and we're now one of the top destinations in the country for in-migration, people from other parts of the country and the world moving to Oklahoma because of our values, because of who we are as Oklahomans. And I thought that the creation of the Human Rights Commission says that our leaders think we're not a welcoming and inclusive place. And nothing could be further from the truth. It sends a signal that we have something to be embarrassed about, that we have a flaw as a state and a city that we need to be correcting. And I just think that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I love that. Did I hear the kitty cry? Yes, I did. Again, he's so needy. We're going to take a really quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Alex Gray. So please don't go away. And I'm going to gather myself together. I'm coming. Welcome back with us to the Conservative Continuum. We are here with Alex Gray, and we are talking about the necessary topic of China and all of those things that impact us, not just nationally. It's not just out there in some other state. It's here in Oklahoma as well. Alex, I'm so glad that you're with us, and I can't help myself. I have to ask you because I know of your connection with former President Trump, and I know you worked closely with him. I am really concerned about what's being done within our justice system. More recently, what this DA Alan Braggs in New York is attempting to do by bringing President Trump under a grand jury to indict him over what I see as ridiculousness and something that, from what I understand, is legal in the state of New York. At most, it would be a misdemeanor, and that the statute of limitations have already expired. So I don't understand, but it smacks of that political tactic weaponization to prevent him from running in 2024. I know you may not be able to say much or give much voice to it, but have you talked to him, or do you have any information that you could share with us? You know, all 77 counties in Oklahoma voted for President Trump.
Look, I think it's clear that what the district attorney in Manhattan is doing is one of the most egregious politicizations of justice in American history. To go after a former president for something that the federal prosecutors have repeatedly decided is not something they can prosecute, to go after something that his predecessor as district attorney declined to prosecute, to go after something where the main witness is a convicted liar, to go, where, as you said, traditionally, if these things had occurred, they would be misdemeanors at most. And to do it when he is a candidate for reelection, this is really Banana Republic egregious politicization. And I think what is, to me, obviously my respect for the former president is could not be higher. But to me, what is particularly sad and dangerous about this is individually, we talked earlier about institutions and the strength of our institutions as a constitutional republic. It is the individual actions of everyone who's entrusted with positions of power that give strength to those institutions. And when you have someone like Alvin Bragg, who is violating their oath of office and is behaving in a way that undermines the oath that he took, you chip away at those institutions. And if you have 100 Alvin Braggs over many years, you begin to really damage the fabric of the Constitution, of our Bill of Rights, and of our political system. And so that's what really is so sad to me. As I said, I think we're incredibly resilient as a republic. I think that if you get enough Alvin Braggs over enough period of time, we're going to have a real problem, and we're going to really wonder what happened to our country if we continue to do things that are going to take us down a very, very slippery slope.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to put this in there. Any DA that is backed by George Soros, I don't know, that saying that name makes you a target. And frankly, I can't worry about that. But we have one of those here in Oklahoma. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about any DA that would be backed by George Soros, because it seems like that is also an intention to destroy that city, or come against their political opponents.
Well, look, we've seen that these radical left-wing district attorneys all across the country are making America's beautiful urban areas uninhabitable. And we've watched it in Seattle and Portland and New York and Chicago and San Francisco and Los Angeles. You go down to Washington, D.C., you go down the list. These places have become just nightmares in so many cases. Crime is through the roof. Quality of life is taking a remarkable downward turn. America's big cities used to be some of our greatest accomplishments, and now it's the homelessness, the crime, the disorder, and it's abetted, and it's in many ways encouraged by these radical district attorneys and radical mayors, and supported by, in many cases, public employee unions, teachers unions especially, who fund these politicians and who are allowing our children, particularly minority children, to be stuck in crime-ridden, underperforming schools. And so, you look at the cycle of this type of behavior, it is destroying our inner cities and our urban areas. And hopefully, you saw in Chicago that there was finally some pushback, and the mayor of Chicago lost, and we may have a tough on crime reformer winning in Chicago potentially. Hopefully, we'll start to see Americans of all parties pushing back and saying, we can't stand for this.
Yeah, I agree with you. And thank you for bringing up that there is that edge that's coming with, the mayor of Chicago, being taken out, or not being taken out, forgive my language, being removed from office and somebody else being voted in. I want to give you the last word, Alex. We're getting ready to be end of our time. Do you have a website that you want to share with us? Your book, any last words that you want to talk about? I'll give you the last word.
Sure. Follow me on Twitter, Alex Gray 4OK, Alex Gray 4OK, and offer some thoughts on there on different issues that we're facing as a state and as a country. And look, we're in a really remarkable period, both domestically and overseas. And I just can't stress enough how much we need leadership, and we need people like your viewers to go and to write and to show up at the offices of their elected representatives and peacefully but persuasively make the case that we need leadership. We need our elected leaders to stand up, whether it's on China, whether it's on getting to the bottom of the origins of COVID, whether it's holding people accountable for the terrible failed policies that were implemented in response to COVID that have led to extraordinary economic and social loss for this country. We need to hold people accountable. And that's what I think the Republican Congress is trying to do. And we need to have Oklahomans particularly, I think we're in the reddest state in the country. We need to be using our voices to make our voices heard. And we need to say that we whether it's local, state, federal. We want to see people held accountable for failed policies and for acting in ways that go against our interests and our values.
Absolutely. I love that. And please, everything that you do legally and lawfully, but be strategic about it. Make sure that you have your voices be heard. I couldn't say it better. Alex, thank you so much for being with us. It is a pleasure to have you. We are so grateful, and I can't wait to have you back so we can talk more. We can get more insight. I hope that you come back.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for curling up with us today. I am so grateful to all of you for watching my program, and I am truly blessed by all of you. Thank you to my guest, Alex Gray. I hope that you all gained insight into the communist threat that is permeating our nation. That woke left embraces the Chinese authoritarianism. They have praised China's COVID policies while China was locking up their people in their homes and starving them to death. Yes, that is true. We need to take legal, lawful action now because the CCP left is looking at world domination. Remember, everything that you do should be peaceful, in peace, and lawful. Now, please subscribe to the Conservative Continuum on patreon.com/McMeow. You can also follow us on Rumble and Facebook. The Conservative Continuum with McMeow is on True Social, Telegram, Substack, and Getter. I look forward to seeing you all next week when we will have a guest back that we had about a month ago, Jake Lang. He is a patriot prisoner and he is still in prison as of today. We will be checking in with him and he is going to be promoting his new book, Patriot Prisoner, on our show. Now don't forget, stand up, speak out, get involved, and be blessed always, my friends.